Hello and welcome to tonight's Winter Alumni College course and Worcester Wine and Web Design. So if you did bring a drink with you, I just brought a bottle of water, but I would love to do a quick cheers to Worcester and to Matt for leading this course. So cheers. Thanks for joining us. My name is Stephanie Maringer, and I am the Assistant Director of Regional Programs here at the College of Worcester. Joining me tonight is Jean Roberts. She is the Director of Annual Giving, and Catherine Abrecht, who is the Assistant Director of Advancement Communications. They're our staff for tonight, so if you need any assistance with Zoom, which I imagine you're all quite tech savvy if you're joining us for this tech sort of a course, but if you need any assistance, we're here to help you. Just send us a message in the chat. You can also use the chat to communicate with each other. We'd love to hear where you are joining us from around the world, so feel free to add that. And then you can pose questions throughout the course, especially if you have a question while Matt is going through the course material. Feel free to add a question to the chat, and one of us staff members will be sure to call it out. To fully participate in tonight's course and make this virtual environment feel as much like a Worcester classroom as possible, we encourage you all to turn on your video, which I see you have done, so thank you. It's great to see all your faces. And then we want to make this course as accessible as possible as well. So we have a live transcript available that you can view by clicking on the otter.ai link in the top left-hand corner of your screen. I will provide you with the link to that in the chat as well. We are also recording this course tonight, so try to limit as much like getting up and moving around as possible. And I think that's it. So without further ado, I want to thank Matthew Germaine for volunteering to lead this course and sharing his knowledge with all of us tonight. And take it away, Matt.
All right, great. Everyone can hear me okay? Awesome. First off, I'm Matt. I am a 2015 grad of the College of Worcester. I'm wearing black and gold because I'm in Pittsburgh right now. So I figured I'd show the spirit, at least in colors. Yeah, so thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Jean and Catherine as well. Thank you, all of you, for joining. And I think at least one or two people I know personally on this call, so it's good to see some familiar faces as well, which is great. I wanted to do just a couple brief housekeeping announcements before we kind of dive in here. The first is if it's Worcester Wine and Web Design, if you brought a drink, great. I kind of have like a Irish coffee type situation here myself, so feel free to enjoy as you see fit. The second is this course is intended to kind of be a code along, if you would. I found that, at least in my experience, at least with coding and web design, people can tell you a lot and you can read a lot and you can watch a lot of videos, but oftentimes it's best if you kind of just get your hands dirty yourself. And perhaps that's true for other endeavors. So it's up to you whether or not what you want to do, but I hope that I have two screens here. So I'll be presenting one and I'll be kind of coding along and showing everyone what to do. You can either do the same if you can fit it on one screen, or if you have two screens, that's great. Or you can just sit back and enjoy and kind of take it all in. So whichever you'd like to do. So that's two parts I want to talk about. The third is because I have two screens and because I'll be looking kind of down here at my screen and stuff, I'll be looking all over the place. I know it's good to make eye contact and everything, but that's kind of hard to do, just the nature of this. So with that in mind, if you have any questions or concerns, as Stephanie said, feel free to interrupt me at any time, put it in the chat, and we'll go from there. And then that was 1, 2, 3. The fourth and final housekeeping thing is I'm always learning with web development and coding. I think I consider myself still fairly new to the field and everything. So I can certainly walk you through this project, and I'm really excited to do that. But kind of coding and web development technology as a whole, it's an evolving field. And if you ask a question, there's a pretty big chance I may not know the answer to it. And I'm happy to say, I don't know. And we can look it up together. And if anyone is so inspired to continue learning web design after this course, just know that that's the case, and that's perfectly normal. And then the fifth point I wanted to say, I think I said final before, was that it's great if you learn something in this course, but there's a chance it may be a lot all at once. So what I consider to be an even better goal is if any of you walk away being inspired to learn more. So those are my 5 housekeeping points. And without any further ado, I think we're going to dive right in. And this is where I begin juggling my screens. So let's see here. Okay. So what we're going to be doing here is we are going to start with one of the exercises that kind of got me into learning coding and web development as a whole. And I read about it in a book when I was first kind of learning the ropes of web design and everything. So what I have here, if everyone can see my slideshow, is these are, most of these are links to just kind of goofy news stories. So this one happened pretty recently and it was pretty local. So we'll open it here. And this is the Pittsburgh NPR News website. So it was a funny story in downtown Pittsburgh where I live in the city. There was a sinkhole that opened. This is the context, and a bus fell in, and there were some pretty dramatic images. Everyone was okay, and everyone escaped fine, but it's a pretty epic image. So what I thought we could do was a sinkhole could have captured this bus and it made it fall down. But what I thought was like this headline and this picture, they're just asking for some editing. Like it's a kind of a Mad Lib, like what happened here? So a way to look under the hood of a web page in Google Chrome, the browser that I'm using here, is you right click and you do inspect. And oh, actually a better way to do it, I'm remembering stuff on the spot here, is highlight the headline and then do inspect. And if we pull down here, you can see this is highlighted. So here's the headline here. And what's pretty cool is what I discovered in this book is if you highlight some of the text, you could say, what's a goofy caption? I don't know. Underground Cleveland Browns fans swallow PGH bus. Like I think the Steelers and the Browns have a rivalry. So if we switch that and if we click out, we totally just kind of hacked the news site. And that's like pretty cool. So you look at this official NPR news station site, see this epic picture of the bus, and what happened? Well, it's not a sinkhole. it's the Cleveland Browns kind of got some revenge on the Steelers, and they swallowed one of the city buses there. So when I did that exercise when I was first learning my way around web design, I'm like, this is pretty cool. I got to learn more how to do this. And that's kind of what kind of started the learning journey here. And this is kind of where we're going to jump off into building building our own project. So if we look where we change that headline, we'll notice there's several pieces of information here. We can ignore that right now. Just focus on what is highlighted here. And what we see is we see some kind of bracket, and we see H1, and then we see some more things, and then a closing bracket, and then the actual headline that I wrote, and then the same H1 with the closing carets, but with a slash. So this is HTML, and it's one of the things we're going to use in the project, and one of the things I'm going to teach you the basics of how to do. So I'm going to bring juggling all the screens here. I apologize. We're going to go to Codepen, which is a site that kind of allows web development to be, we can easily build web development projects in it. And we are going to create a new pen. And if anyone has any questions about Codepen, I know it's something I had everyone do ideally beforehand, but if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and we can talk about that a little bit more. And what we're going to do is Codepen, real quick, it has these 3 columns: HTML, CSS, and JS or JavaScript. And then up here is our title. I'm just going to, if you have Codepen open, you can call it whatever you would like, but I'm just going to call it Worcester Project. Oops, it's not. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to, in the HTML column, importantly, I'm going to write that same HTML tag like we saw on that bus site. And then I'm going to put my first web development project. And kind of just like magic, what you wrote in those H1 tags, it appears right below. And like, that's pretty cool. If you're following along and you wrote what I just did here, like you wrote your first code, you wrote your first HTML, so that's great. And what an H1 is it's an HTML tag called a header. And HTML, just to dive a little bit more into it, juggling my screens again, it's short for hypertext markup language, and it kind of basically describes the structure or blueprint of a web page. I kind of personally think of it as like the bones of a web page, or say you're building a house, you can think of it as the blueprint. It just organizes and gives information and structure about the page to the browser. And a browser is Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or wherever you search for a website. As we kind of saw in both that bus story and what we did in Codepen just now, HTML, you code it using tags around content. So the tags in this case each tag was the H1 in the caret brackets. And then the content is actually what appeared on the screen. So I think it was my first web development project or something like that. And for HTML, it's very important to have opening and closing tags, as we saw. And there are some exceptions to that. But all you should know right here is that you should have opening and closing tags most of the time. So if I minimize this and go back to Codepen here, what we're going to do is we're going to write a little bit more HTML so we get something. The end project here is going to be something a lot like this. Full page view, this should do it. This is kind of what we're going to build right here, just as like a big picture. So as you can see, we kind of already have the first HTML here. And there's some more HTML looking text down here. But this is just kind of the big picture. So we're going to go in and learn a few more HTML tags. Oh, something I forgot. I apologize. One thing in HTML is that, at least in Codepen, it's a good idea to have everything in a larger body tag. So a body you can kind of think of as like the buns between a sandwich, and then everything in that, everything else that you write is contained within the sandwich buns, if that makes sense. So with that in mind, I'm going to do the other closing HTML tag. And I think it was my first web development project. Perfect. And then what are we going to do next? We're going to make another section. And one of the ways you can do that is HTML. In HTML is you just do another tag called a div. And what a div does in part is it just defines another section or division of a document in HTML. And remember, just going back to what was on the slide, is a div, you have the opening part with the caret brackets, and then the closing part with the slash. And then everything in a div is kind of just like the body, it's contained, everything you write in the div is kind of its own sandwich. So to build out the div sandwich or tags, we noticed there was an image. So the way to do that in HTML is to use an image tag, img. And images, that's one of the cases in HTML where you don't need a closing bracket. If you notice, I just did one img, and then I still had that slash, but I do not need to do this. This would not work. So we can just do just this closing part here. And then what we need to do is we need to actually retrieve the image. And in HTML, the way to do that, Stephanie, I want to share a link. I'm going to share 2 links at some point. Is there a chat feature I can do?
Yep. So while you're sharing your screen, it changes from the bottom to the top on Zoom. So you sort of have to hover over the top of your screen, and you should be able to click on the chat from there.
Chat, here we go, perfect. Awesome. So this will be helpful down the road. We are going, this is our image here. And then, this is in the way here. This is another thing I'm going to share. Everyone can just ignore it until later, but while I'm sending links out. So we're going to use that first link I sent in the chat, not the second one quite yet. Thanks, Stephanie. And then to get out of the chat, I guess I just X out of it. There we go. Cool. Okay. Sorry about that brief detour. So the way to bring in an image in HTML is, what does an image need? It needs to know where it comes from. So like, where are we getting this image from? And in HTML, that's called, you use a source attribute. And the way to do that is just type src. But it still doesn't know where that image is. So this is where we use that link. So if you're coding along, you can take that first link I sent and then in quotes, just copy and paste it in. And it's always a joy when the image appears. Great. So far, we have our first header tag, and we loaded in an image. So that's great. Like, it's only, I think, been 20 minutes, and we've already written, we're already using HTML to write a title for a page, a header for a page, our heading, and then we also loaded in an image. And then in addition to using the source link, another thing we need to do is in the event that an image doesn't load, we want to provide like some alternative way to tell the browser that an image is supposed to be here, but it's not. And if it's not, to describe kind of what it is. And that's just good practice in web development. So the way to do that is just do alt or ALT, short for alternative. And then you can just kind of describe the picture however you want. So I'm just going to write go or bagpipers going down a hill. And that's not going to change anything. But if we kind of mess up the image link here, that's interesting why that didn't go away. Let's just say if we don't provide a source, then it should say bagpipers going down a hill. Perfect, because it didn't know where to get the picture, so it provided the alternative text. But I'm going to put that back in because we want the image. And then in HTML, in addition to these tags, you can use certain things like identifiers. In CSS, we'll call them selectors. But since we'll be using this image later on, it's a good idea to use one of the identifiers. And a simple way to do that for this project is to just use a class. So we just type class, and we can just call it whatever we want. So I'm just going to call it image. And that is all we are going to do for now for the image. So again, we have a heading here, and then we have an image down here. And then next, if we kind of look at what we have here, when you hover over this image, you see some text over the image when you hover over it. So we want to type that in as well somehow. And a way to do that is outside of the image, but still within that div, we can just use a p tag for a paragraph. And the same as before, opening tag and a closing tag. Just like we did for image, we're going to give it a class or an identifier. We're just going to call this text. And then, what do we call it here? So click to hear some pipes. You can put whatever you would like if you're coding along, but I'm just going to put the same thing. Or bagpipes, I guess, could be a bit more descriptive. Perfect. So how that appears now is we have a heading, we have an image, and then we have the click to hear some bagpipes right below. So that's what we did. And then just a few final things. If we look at the sample project here, we have this text down here. And what happens here is if you click the College of Worcester, this opens up onto the Worcester homepage. And then if you click the College of Worcester Scott band, this opens up onto the Scott band page. So we're going to do that real quick as well. And the way to do that, one of the ways I should say, is to use another HTML tag, and that's called site. And the way to do that is use the caret brackets with site, and then make sure to have a closing one. I sometimes forget those, so I type them at the same time. And then in between the site tags, we say image from, what did I say? Image from, sure, that works. Image from, and then we want to get that link, image from the College of Worcester. So the way to get a link in HTML so that you click on it and it takes you somewhere else is to use an anchor tag or an anchor element. And you do that using an A. And just so I don't forget the other anchor tag, I'll put that here. And then an anchor, something they're kind of similar to an image tag in some way, is that if you see the College of Worcester down here and you click on it, it doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't know where to take you. And what it needs is a link, kind of an address to know where to go. And the way to give it a link so it knows where to go is just type in href and then set that equal to the Worcester URL, which I have here. If it comes through. There we go. And then an additional nice feature to have is if I were to click this now, this would, if I were to click on this link, it would just open and overwrite everything here, which at least for this is probably not a good idea. Don't want to lose any progress. So the way to open it in a new web page, like we saw before, is to do target equals and then underscore blank. So if we did everything right, fingers crossed, the College of Worcester is now highlighted like a link. And if we click it, all right, yeah. So it opens up in a new tab, just like it should, and it's the Worcester page. So this is great. We have a heading here. We have our picture. We have some text, and then we have a site. Real quick, we're going to do an additional site because we're going to, this site references the image used. And then there's also going to be a sound. And I'm just going to copy and paste that. and make a link to this sound. And I'll just put music courtesy of oh, here we go. The College of Worcester Scott Band. It's always hard to talk and type at the same time. Great. So this has the target link. I just copy and pasted. But we need to update the URL. That's right. So I have the Scott Band URL here. Add that in. And oh, I think that's everything. Yes. So this should work. Excellent. So this is great. It took us to the Scott Band Worcester web page. And just to make sure we have our closing div, we have our closing body. I'm just making sure I have all the closing tags, which is always good to do. Okay, that's great. So we're going to add one more thing in here, but not until later. And what we've done here is we've just written like our first HTML page. So just in like a fairly short amount of time, like this is on Codepen, at least, this is a fully functioning like web page. This is great. So what we're going to do next is, I guess while I kind of get this next section ready, does anyone have any questions about HTML? Feel free to ask in the chat or. Hearing none. Again, feel free to ask any question. We're going to learn a bit about CSS. Matt? Oh, yeah.
Zach has a question. It says, what was the target blank again? It says, I was writing something and I missed it. And you know what? I'm actually going to give you guys permission to unmute yourself so you can ask a question. We've only got a few people on the call, so I think we should be able to make it work pretty well. Okay, so you should hopefully be able to unmute yourself now, if you'd like.
Yeah, I missed what this is Zach. I looked over and saw you the target blank, but I didn't actually realize what that was for, so I missed the purpose of it.
Yeah, so the target blank, where's an example here? Here we go. What the target blank does is what's a good way? I'll just kind of use this as an example. It allows, whenever you click on the link, it will open what the link is in a new tab in the browser. If that link wasn't there, I will I'll edit this one here. So I'll just take this away. And that. So this is the College of Worcester Scott Band. So if you look at the top of my browser, I'll move that down just a little bit. If you look at the top of my browser here, there's 4 tabs. And if I scroll down, this is a bit tricky. Here we go. And I click on the Scott Band, it'll, that's actually very interesting. So it opens the Worcester page right in Codepen, which is something we want. If this were a website that we could go to, like a www web page, and we clicked on the link, it would just override whatever you were on And I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you were opening a bank account and you had a lot of information and it took a lot of time to put all that together, and you clicked a link that didn't have that target blank, the link would override everything you had done and take you to that link. Whereas if you have the target blank, it'll just save everything you've done in the tab and just open the link in a new tab. Does that make sense?
Looks good.
Yeah, I see a lot of nods. good to see. Real quick, I want to put that target blank back just so we can see how the finished project looks later on. Perfect, and we're making good time too. This is great. So the next thing we're going to learn is if we looked at our HTML page that we just made, like it looks great. It's pretty functional. We can read everything, and like everything is there. Just what HTML is supposed to do. We have the bones. We're building the house. We have the blueprint. The studs are up, and the drywall is up, but it's kind of lacking something. And I guess what you could say, if we're using the house metaphor, is that we're lacking the interior decorating. We're kind of lacking a sense of style. I keep using the sandwich metaphor because I like sandwiches, but we have like the bun and the meat, I guess, but we're missing everything that makes it pop: the seasoning, the lettuce, tomato, so on and so forth. And that's where CSS comes in. And CSS, it's short for Cascading Style Sheets. And there's a lot in that name, but basically it just means, how to sum it up? Styles, they cascade kind of down like a waterfall. So if you don't specify that, if you specify one thing should have a style, but something under that doesn't, then it will inherit that style. And as a result, CSS can be a little bit challenging. I know it definitely is for me personally, especially some of the more advanced things. But we're going to get through this for sure. And the CSS, what it does is, as I said before, is it tells the browser how to display HTML. HTML kind of, again, it has that bones, the studs and everything, but it just doesn't do much. We want to tell it how to pop, how to add color. And the way to do that is to use CSS selectors to target the HTML elements, the H1, the div, the site, those tags that we made before. And that's kind of why I did, we'll dive back in really quick soon, but how for image, I did that class equals image. And then for that text, I did that class equals text. Those are, those can be selectors, and that'll make it easier to style our little project here. And one quick thing about CSS is that it is case sensitive. So if you choose to work with it on the future or in the future, it's just important to know that, because if something capitalized could be very different than something lowercase. So
wait, before we keep going, Lauren Comanche, question.
Sure.
CSS, is this the same? I know WordPress is really fussy. Is the CSS we're going to do, is this something that will work in WordPress, or does WordPress have its own rules? It's okay if we don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question. I'm not super familiar with WordPress actually, so
okay.
I'm comfortable saying I don't know.
Totally fine. Totally fine. I've been on your side of the computer before too, so that's fine. It's just I use WordPress at my job, and I see them do CSS, and I don't want to mess our website up. So cool. I'll look that up while you're talking.
Real quick, I do know WordPress, they use themes, I think they're called, and I believe certain themes are built with HTML and CSS. So if you use a theme with WordPress, you're definitely using CSS, I believe. And if you build a custom theme, you certainly would be. But other than that, I'm not 100% sure. Great question. Any others before moving on? Okay, great. So I'm still sharing my screen. Great, cool. So kind of as I said before, like we have the HTML, it's looking great, functional, but it's kind of plain. So we are going to style it with some CSS. One quick thing I just realized is that some of the, for this, if you're coding along, in order for this to work, one thing you should do is the HTML div. Make sure to give that a class of container. So I just added this here. This didn't do anything really here visually, but it'll make a big difference in CSS. All right, so the CSS part can be kind of quick because there's a lot of individual styles. So again, feel free to ask a question. So what we're going to do first is, as we see this body tag, remember that's like our big sandwich bun. And everything that we've written so far is in this body tag. You'll notice these indentations here. That's just a good way to just to locate content of your HTML. And as we can see, the body is no indents at the top, at the very bottom. So we want to style that bun. We want to tell the web right here what flavor bun we want, or everything in that bun. So since it's a body tag, we can just type body, and then we use curly braces. I'm using a Mac, and the curly braces, they're to the right of the P, and you use Shift to access them. There's an opening and a closing curly brace. They can be a little bit hard to find sometimes. But once we have those curly braces, we can say something like the background color. Like if we notice this site here, this project here, it's not a stark white background like this one is. It has like a nice kind of off-white tan color. So we're going to make it that off-white tan color. And I actually have that color saved. It's it looks like gibberish, but it should be that. There we go. And it looks like gibberish, but the main thing to understand is that this is called a hex code color, and hex meaning 6 and code meaning code. So it's like a 6-digit thing. And each digit represents, I don't know the details, but it just represents a different area on a color palette. So the web knows that it's much smarter than I am. This hex code here, it corresponds to this off-white, this nice off-white color here. Alternatively, if you wanted to say red, you can make it a red background, and it changes here. And if you want to make it a red background, please do. Or you could say green. But just saying the color name can be a little bit limiting, and hex code allows you to do a bit more detail. So I'm going to stick with that off-white color. And then like this font looks good, but I'm going to use a sans serif font. And the way to do that is to do font family. And you can just do REL, but if the browser doesn't recognize REL for some reason, you can like give it some alternative fonts, which I'll just do here. So if it doesn't recognize Arial, it'll do Helvetica. And if it doesn't recommend Helvetica, it'll just do a sans serif font. And that's just like a good practice to do. So what we've done here is we've already added some styles. Like that's awesome. Because everything, there's a lot of because we've targeted our body tag and everything is in the body. Everything in the body tag that is text or background. The text is changed. This text has changed. And then the background is that nice off-white color. So if we're looking here, we want to center our heading just because that's like it just kind of looks nice. And a way to do that is we don't want to, how to say it, we just want to center this heading right now. We don't want to like center the click to hear some bagpipes. We don't want to center the sites necessarily. We just want to center this heading for now. And the way to do that is just like we did with body. We target that H1 element because this is our my first web development project. We target it. We use those curly braces. And in this tag, this CSS property is fairly self-explanatory. It's text align, center. And it's centered. So now it looks kind of goofy. We have this centered, and this all is still to the left. And what we're going to do next is target this div element. And remember, we added a class of container. So for container, because I've given it, I'm not just saying div, I'm using a class. I'm referencing this container class. And the way to do that is to do a period and then the name of the class. So this is saying, hey, CSS, look for the tag that has a class of container. And that's what that does. But then we use our curly braces again. And then these, we're going to use something called CSS Flexbox. And that's a little bit somewhat of an advanced topic that we're not going to go too much into detail right now. But we can just type position relative display flex direction column. It looks really goofy now, but we're not done styling it yet. And then align items center. And that in a really nice way, like it centered everything. Like we centered this heading in one way, and then we centered everything else in another. And that's kind of a recurring theme with web development and coding in general, is that there are a ton of different ways to do things. And for this project, at least, this is one that I just found worked fairly well. So if we go to our project here real quick, like it's actually looking kind of like what we want. Everything's centered. We have a nice off-white background and the fonts are matching up. So the next thing we want to do, we notice this image is pretty small, whereas this image is pretty big. So you probably guessed what we're going to do next is we're going to target this image. And the way to do that is we have an image tag and it has a class name of image. So just like before, targeting the div with a class of container, we're going to follow that same convention. We're going to target the image tag with a class of image. Excuse me. And then we use our curly braces, and then we add these following styles. Like above, we use position relative. And then we use this is going to be, we're going to add this feature towards the end. But right now, we're going to do opacity 1. And that's saying that this picture, it shouldn't be transparent at all. Opacity of 1 is solid. I believe if you do opacity 0, you won't see it at all. It totally disappeared. Yep. And I think if you do like 0.5, it'll be halfway. So yeah, opacity just, it determines the transparency. But we just want 1. And then now we're going to mess with the size. We kind of want it to match up and be a little bit bigger, significantly bigger, I guess. So we're going to do height of 592 pixels, a unit of measurement on a web page. And we're going to do a width of 1,000 pixels. That's the right number of zeros, yeah. And then if we look at this, it's really faint, but this picture has like a, this is the end project. It has like a nice black outline that makes it pop, whereas this one doesn't. And so we want to make that outline. And the way to do that is just tell it you want an outline. And what do we want it? It was pretty solid, so we put solid. And then 1 pixel, that unit of measurement. So it kind of appeared. And then we want it black, so that'll make it black. If you want to kind of get a little crazy, I think you could make it green in the same way. You can just faintly see it green. You can make it a little bit bigger. So we got a nice green background there. I'm personally gonna stick with the black. And then we want to put a transition property. This will be used later. 0.5s here, it means 0.5 seconds or half a second. And we want to write ease. And we'll see that in action later. And then we want to put a z index of 2. And there's just a few more styles. We're only going to select 2 more things. What we want to do here is if we look at this end project, we have like this cool hover feature. And we want to do that next. And the way to do that is to target the image, the exact same image, but on a separate selector. But only this time we're going to put a colon. And a colon is kind of right next to the L, Shift L, next to the L on a MacBook. And we're going to put hover. And so this is telling the browser what to do when you hover over the image. So as we saw before, it kind of becomes transparent. And we've seen what makes a picture transparent before. That's the opacity property up here. So when we hover over it, we want it to be a little bit transparent. So this should work now. Check it out. We make our picture transparent, just like in the project. And a couple more quick things. When we hover over this project, if you notice my cursor, it's a black arrow. But when I hover over the picture, it makes a little hand, like a pointer. And the way to do that is to specify the cursor. And just tell it you want it to be a pointer. It's always good to, each time you add a style, it's a good practice to test to make sure it works. So, yep, there it is. It's a little pointer. And then the last style we want to add for this hover situation is that strange Z index above. And we want to make that 0. And I promise I'll explain Z index after we do this last style here. It'll hopefully make a bit more sense. So real quick, I'm going to open up what we have. We have our heading. We have our picture that hovers. And we have our site tags. But hey, wait, our bagpipe thing is still down here. Whereas in this end project, it appears when you hover over it. Like, that's pretty cool. How to do that? The way to do that is with our last style. So as we saw before, this is our text. It's in a p tag, but also it has that class of text. So just like we selected the image, just like we selected the container, we're going to say, hey, CSS, look for the element that has a class of text. And we're going to put position absolute. We're going to say color black. Oops, a colon there. And the color just makes the text color black. It just makes it like a black font. We're going to say that the font size should be pretty big, so bigger than what it is. It's pretty small right now, so we're going to say 60 pixels. And then, oh yes, we want to center it. Text align center, because that's what it was doing before. And then we want to do that Z index. And this is where I'm going to, the Z index is an odd property. And there's a little bit of logic involved, but basically a Z index that tells the page how to layer certain things. So believe it or not, we hover over this and we see the bagpipes here, but we see it disappear when we don't hover over it. So it kind of appears and disappears, but it's there the whole time. And what a Z index does is it tells the browser like what order to pancake, in this case, the image and the text, if that makes sense. So a higher Z index or an element with a greater Z index or stack order, it will always appear in front of an element with a lower Z index. So what do we have here? So the image right here, image 2, so that's a higher stack order. But then when we hover over the image, the Z index becomes 0. Whereas the text, that's the missing property there. Z index of 1. So the text is always going to have a Z index of 1. And the image, when you don't hover over it, has the index of 2. So 1 is less than 2, so the text will appear behind the image. But when we hover over the image, the Z index becomes 0, and it stays 1. So because 1 is greater than 0, the text will appear in front of the image as we have it, which is pretty cool. I might be missing a style. Oh, yes, I am. Font size. So we notice that, sorry, I'm going to bring this up. If we notice in here, it may have been pretty apparent, but the bagpipes text is up at the top, whereas in this project, it's nicely centered. And a way to do that, to implement it, is just say top 200 pixels. So this is saying, hey, CSS, take that property that, or take that text that has the class text and push it away from the top 200 pixels. It's might be a bit hard to understand, but just it's saying that 200 pixels should be in between the text and the top of the page, which is this little bar here. So I think that's everything. If we hover over our image, check it out. It looks pretty similar to what we have, or kind of our goal project, excuse me. So if you've been following along and you've been coding along with me, like this is a pretty solid HTML CSS project, and like congratulations, like this is awesome, and you're doing great. Like we basically made our made everything we see here. Everything is centered with the right color and picture. We're just missing one extra feature though, and I'm not sure everyone, I don't think anyone can hear it, but if I click on this, because it's Worcester, if you click on it, it says click to hear some pipes, and I click on it, you'll hear some bagpipe music. And we want to make sure to do that because that's a kind of a cool feature. And real quick, I'm going to show you how to do that. And that's a way to do that is to use JavaScript. And JavaScript, it is a real jumping off point. It's a very popular programming language, and it kind of really moves beyond everything we've done so far, as you might expect. But everything you need to know in this presentation here is that, so we built our house. We have our bones, we have our studs, the blueprint, the sandwich buns and the meat. For CSS, we added the seasoning, the flavor, the toppings, as well as the interior decorating. If you want to do our house metaphor, though, it's missing the electricals, the plumbing, the HVAC, everything that kind of makes it alive and interactive. Like we want to be able to actually eat the sandwich. We actually want to be able to live in our house and have it be a good dwelling. So a good way to do it, like I said, is through JavaScript. And as referenced in the metaphor, it makes the site interactive. It adds behavior and functionality, and it lets us interact with what we've made. And it truly is a real jumping off point. It's a real programming language used in many, many companies. And it can just keep going. There's a lot to say on it. But for all we need to do in our little project here is one of the key parts of JavaScript is functions. And if you remember from like, I guess, algebra or math or whatever, a function is just something at its most basic. Could be scary, but just make sure the important thing to know is a function, you put something into it and you get something out of it. So what we're going to do is just tell JavaScript in our JavaScript panel that we want to make a function. And I'm going to call it play bagpipes, which is a good idea. Like you want a function to be descriptive. And you can add, these are normal parentheses. On a Mac, they're above the 9 and the 0. And then you do those quirky curly braces there. And right now, this function is not going to really do much. What we need to do is pass something into it. And we're going to do that by doing a constant or const. We're going to create a variable called bagpipes, again, descriptive. And then we're going to say we want to add a new sound or instantiate a new sound object, a bit more technical definition, new audio. And then in the chat, I sent you that second link, and this is where we're going to use it. I can send it again if folks want. I'm going to add it here. And then I will send it again just to make it accessible. So that's the sound. X out of that. Great. Okay, what am I missing? Oh, quotes. You got to add quotes to it. So we've kind of got what we pass into the function. Now we just need to tell it what to do with this crazy link called bagpipes. And what we're going to do is bagpipes.play. And in JavaScript, you end, it's good practice to end things with a semicolon. So 2 semicolons here. But it's not going to work just yet. One more thing we have to do is add a method, or I'm sorry, an attribute to the image. And we want to call it, it's called onClick. So this is telling it what to do when we click on it. And we want to tell it to play bagpipes with the parentheses. I got my opening and closing quotes, got onClick. Yes, so the function is called play bagpipes, and we're referencing it here on the image. So I'm going to try to test mine. I don't think folks will be able to hear it. It's working for me. That's loud. It's just a 10-second little song. So if anyone was able to do that, was anyone able to do that to get the bagpipes playing? This is kind of a tricky part. So like if anyone has any questions, I'll take a look at the chat. This is the final part of the project. Yes, it is incredibly loud. Yeah, definitely back in my golf. Cool. All right, well, this is really great. So this project here, but you got to trust me on this. It plays the bagpipes too. Also kind of loud if you don't have the volume down. And then it's also, everything is centered. It has the background color. The font is good. The picture size is right. I don't think I showed everyone the text hovering, but you hover over it and the text appears. And these links work as shown before. So believe it or not, it's just been like barely an hour, I think. And we've made our first like HTML, CSS, JavaScript web page. And I don't know, I guess I should have said at the beginning that I was just going to assume that everyone didn't really know anything about this kind of stuff. But wherever you started, you know how to make an HTML, CSS, JavaScript web page. Like, you know, the very basics, and you made a project you can show off. So you can definitely like show your family and friends and tell them, look what I built, and make sure to turn the volume down maybe when you do. And stuff like that. So well done, everyone. I have a couple more slides I want to share. As I said, kind of at the beginning, coding and web development, it's really just, it can be a lot of stuff, and just the nature of technology being what it is, doing stuff in the industry, there's just a lot to learn, and it's constantly changing. JavaScript, like I said, is a real jumping off point, and there's a lot to learn. So in that spirit, I wanted to, if you're interested in continuing this kind of stuff, perhaps building, elaborating on the project, these are some of my favorite resources. Free Codecamp, I really like. Traversy Media, he's a great teacher. As generic as it sounds, YouTube is excellent. You just got to know the right things to search. Books are great. There's a couple programs out there as well. I did one called Tech Elevator, and then oops, don't want to go that far. The list just really goes on, and web development and coding and software development engineering, it's a really big field, and there's a lot to learn, and the resources out there are only exceeded by the things you want to learn, I would say. So it's a real jumping off point, and I'd encourage everyone to take a look at some of these resources and perhaps some of the ones that you find. And if you felt like continuing with a project we did, that we built together, that you built, a good thing to do might be to add a different picture and a different sound. Like you could take a picture of your pet and then make that the picture, and then record a picture of your pet making their pet sound. And when you click on the picture, have the pet make it sound. You can also have the picture play. Real quick, you can do this on your own. I feel like we've touched on everything fairly quickly here, but I think everyone's learned the skills to do this if they want to do it. If you learn a bit more JavaScript, I'm very confident you could have the picture play one of multiple sounds each time you click on it. That's a real treat, all the bagpipe sounds. And if you learn even more JavaScript, you can even add a pause feature in addition to the play feature that we built. And that would be a really good puzzle to figure out as well. And then the list just keeps going on. You could keep developing this project. You can build your own or start from scratch with another thing. So putting what we've learned to use, I used our H1 tags, but it doesn't really work in PowerPoint. Thanks for joining my course, and feel free to get in touch if you add to that project anyway, and you just want to show me what it is. Feel free to send me the link to it. For Codepen, you can just use the link in your URL when you're using Codepen and just send it to me. And then feel free to get in touch on any of the links I provided. And I thought this picture was pretty funny. Web development, it can feel like you're just pulled in many different directions and hanging on for dear life. And I'm still fairly new to the field myself. And sometimes it feels like this picture. So don't don't get discouraged, and know that there's a lot out there to learn from. And again, my goal here was not necessarily to build this project. That was one part of it, but more important, it was to kind of inspire everyone to move forward and learn something new, and perhaps build a project of their own. So that's kind of the end of my class right now. Again, congratulations, everyone, if you coded along. Like, awesome job. You built your own web development project. That is awesome. And if anyone has any questions, if anyone didn't complete the project yet and has technical issues with that, I'm happy to help. But Stephanie, if we can open the floor, and like my official class, I guess, is done now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some time for questions. And I believe I gave you permission to sort of unmute yourself. So you should be able to just click unmute and ask a question if you've got one, or share a comment. And then I think we'll give it a few minutes if you've got some questions, and then we'll wrap it up. But this was great, Matt. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot. So thanks for leading this course.
That's awesome.
Matt, I just noticed your H1, close H1 on your on your H1. That's very cute.
No. I figured folks would understand what it was now. I left it as the last slide for a reason.
What was your major at Worcester?
I studied anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
And I minored in music. And
Cool.
I definitely, with COVID and everything, I've been playing a lot of music, not just bagpipe sounds.
Yes.
But yeah, I really value, and I use the anthropology insights every day. I know at Worcester I really wasn't sure what I wanted to major in, but I knew I would always be working with people and people of different cultures, and I figured majoring in that, that was a good skill to have. And I definitely use that every day.
That was a point I definitely made in my when I spoke to my graduating class. I talked about how what you major in doesn't matter as much as the fact that you learned how to do things like research and write and talk to other people and connect with people. And
Definitely.
but everyone always asks then, how the hell did you get into this? So how did you start coding then if you were in?
That's a long and winding road.
Fair enough.
I guess the quick summation is I picked up that, I think I have it right over here. It's just a Coding for Dummies book, just out of curiosity, and it had that news headline exercise. And I did that on some headline and totally felt like a computer whiz and did that. But long story short, I did AmeriCorps after graduation, which is like a Peace Corps type program. And there were a couple projects there where I worked with technology, and the term like tech for good or civic tech, that came up several times. And when I realized that you could have like a really big impact by doing that kind of work while also learning new things, I like learning new things. That just seemed like a great route to take. And it's been a lot of self-teaching. I did kind of take a big leap a couple years ago, and I did, there was a program here in Pittsburgh, I listed on the slide. And that was pretty intense. I learned a lot. In retrospect, I really didn't learn much at all compared to what I know now.
Well, you have, right, because that's everything I've
yeah.
heard from the developers at my job is that it's, you can learn the very basics from those boot camps, but you have to, like you said at the beginning, you have to just play with it on your own and just get into the weeds with it to really learn.
Definitely. But yeah, to more succinctly answer your question, it just seemed like a better, another way to have an impact and learn new things. And when I thought about it from that perspective, it just seemed like a natural route to take.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. That first exercise was kind of creepy / a way to explain some of the news stories that we might see. How easy it is to like do that, take a screenshot, and here, this is what was published from any perspective, right? It's kind of interesting. That was cool.
You're exactly right. Without getting too much into the technical side, when you do that, and you change the headline, like we saw how it changed. But if you were to refresh the page, it'll just appear as it was. So it's not like you're actually breaking into the real news site's website.
Yeah.
But like you said, with screenshots and everything, those things go viral, and the cat's out of the bag before you know it. So you're exactly right.
That was really neat though. Thank you, Matt. I learned a lot. So thanks.
I'm glad. I really am glad. Thanks for joining.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Matt. A virtual round of applause for Matt. This was lovely. And just a quick thank you to all of you for joining us tonight and for participating. And keep an eye on your email. I'm going to send you another one tomorrow because you haven't got enough from me yet. And it's just going to share some ways that you can stay involved with the college in this particularly challenging year and stay engaged with us. So it was great to have you all tonight. And I hope to see you at future Worcester events, specifically our IS Monday Happy Hour coming up here in March on the 22nd. So I hope to see you there. And take care, everyone. Have a good night.